Whoa, mid-drink. Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. First, apologies if you're getting like a low hum on the feed. It's not my fault. It's 100 degrees outside today, and the AC is already blasting. So I got like a vent right here above the camera. Nothing I can do about that. So if there's a little bit of zh in the background, that's what it is. Apologies. So let's jump in from last week. I'm going to do 2 more streams on this Dusk to Pest Browser Tests converter. It's a mouthful, but it's descriptive, so we're going to go with it. Last week, we started working on this convert API bit, basically the beef of kind of what this is. Everything before this was really a lot of what I would call normalization. It's kind of making sure that the project is compatible and able to, run pest, which means it may or may not need to convert to the pest, spec-based syntax. Now it's a matter of converting the actual calls inside of these browser Dusk browse closures, which is what we did Friday. So we basically looped over any files with a browse call effectively, and then we parse them to get a higher fidelity, the actual syntax tree, to gain occurrences of those different pieces. And then what I did off stream, again, this code kind of exists everywhere else, so what I do off stream was basically just copy this code. Basically copied some code from many other tasks. So again, I wasn't going to rewrite this from memory on stream, so I kind of did this part outside of the call. So here's effectively what I did. I've got this string helper, which is actually an extension of Laravel's helper, but it has things in it like indent and unindent and sentence case and all this kind of stuff. So basically what I do is I take a segment of the string, that offset that we captured in our finder, and then I unindent it. I take just the body offset, unindent it, and replace the whole offset of the entire occurrence that we found. So again, a little bit of a mouthful. We're going to rerun this and see what that means here in a second. The main takeaway is all that's really left for now is to replace this visit calls with kind of just an equal sign, I think, to be honest. In these cases, in converting this, I'm not looking for like a 100% conversion. Again, we're kind of looking for what I call like a good enough conversion. Ideally we want this to be runnable out of the box, but we're not really attempting to like refactor your code here, right? There still may be some opportunity to clean up these tests, because you have to think about it. You're basically converting 2 testing libraries potentially. I'm converting not only from PHP unit to pest, but then I'm also converting from Dusk to the Pest Browser Test, which might just have both of which might have different conventions that you would want to implement in your code. That's not necessarily the goal of this. I do some of that stuff sometimes. I do try to do some of that polish. But really the goal is that this runs. That's first and foremost. So that's kind of really where I'm starting now. I'll polish this over time with, usage and support tickets and things like that. But like, initially, if I can take this and push it out, like, that's the goal, right? The goal is get this running over here, and then we'll clean it up later. So, good enough software, right? This is a big thing I remember from like the Pragmatic Programmer, I think is where I remember that from. It's probably predates that, but the book, The Pragmatic Programmer, I remember them talking about good enough, So that's still kind of what we're after here. This isn't even launched yet. So this is all alpha is the point. We're very alpha right now. So let's do this replace visit calls. Let's write the code for this a little bit blind, and then I'm going to rerun the PR, and we'll kind of see where it goes, right? So the whole point, I can bring up the docs if we want to see like the examples, but really what we're talking about is in Dusk, what we have now is something like browser arrow visit, right? And then And then we kind of start, theoretically, we kind of start our chain of all of the Dusk stuff after that, right? And in Pest, they would do something more like page equals visit, and this is kind of a top level call. Now again, theoretically, according to Nuno, most, not all, but most of this API from here on, from there on, is the same. The naming's the same, the assertions are the same. Again, Pest is mostly just a wrapper. It's more about how you structure your tests than it is its very own testing library. It still leverages PHP unit. It still leverages the Laravel assertions. All of this stuff comes, out of the box. At most, Pest kind of wraps this stuff. There's not many of its own things that it does. So while there might be a handful, 2, 3, 4 methods that we'll still need to convert, this is kind of the big conversion to do, is really this. And it's really not all that crazy, right? In fact, we can pretty much do this with string manipulation. I mean, we really just need to look for this left side variable, arrow, visit, opening parenthesis, right? So I don't have my regex shirt on today, but that's basically what I'm going to do. I'm going to write a regex to do this. Now we can increase the fidelity of this because browser is the variable that was passed into the closure, and we have those from our, abstract syntax tree, from our parsing. We got the correct names for those. So again, we can increase kind of the fidelity of this by saying, okay, you have to be one of those names, arrow visit, right? And then we can kind of take it from there. So while we're doing string manipulation, which sounds, a little loosey-goosey, it's actually going to be, again, good enough, right? So let's get after it. Let's just abstract this to a method, to kind of keep this top part a little bit clean. So we'll just, because there might be other replacements we're going to need to do eventually, but for now we'll just do something like visit, right? Or we could say replace. We might just have a handful of these replace methods, right? So what we can pass this, we'll probably need to pass this the occurrence information and then the block, right? And the block right now is that segment that we pulled out. So let me bring up, let's make this a little easier. Let's bring up this basic Dusk, I think we have. No, basic test. Yeah, let's bring this up. Body is this. That's body right now. The segment that we pulled out, block is this segment right here. Okay? So just kind of keep that in your mind. I have it in there, but sometimes, again, I'm deep in the code here, so I kind of know what block is because these are kind of the conventions and namings that I use within Shift. So this is block. Okay? So basically what we're going to do is we'll take this string, we'll do a regex on it. That's, as good enough as possible to kind of capture these based on the fact that we know this variable name from the syntax tree. We have 100% fidelity here, right? We know with 100% certainty that the browser variable, at least at the top of this, maybe not 100%. We know that's the name 100%. We might not know through this whole block that browser maintains, that. But again, I'm okay. That's good enough, right? If someone rescopes, overwrites browser within that scope, I'll deal with that, based on the support ticket. But for the most part, that's what we're talking about here. So let's make this method. This will ultimately return a string. What we're going to do here is we'll just reassign block, right? And let's take our pseudocode and bring it a little closer to home here. So this will be an array, and this is kind of just our little array metadata, structure of stuff from the syntax tree. So this will have things like the names that we need, right? The variable names that we need, like browser. And then string block, that's good. I'm going to change block in this case to snippet. Again, just a little bit of a convention inside of the Shift code base. I know that I'm working on a snippet of code. So let's bring this here, and ultimately we're going to run a return snippet. So we'll just work on it in line here. Now again, this is going to be kind of a big nasty regex. I'm going to go ahead and write the regex, but we need to replace it with again, we need to replace it with the actual variable names from occurrence. So for now, let's just write the regex in my mind, and we'll see how it works because we have some test cases, right? So let's see here. So we'll basically do a preg replace, and we can probably just straight return this, but just for debugging, I'm going to keep all this separate for now. So let's get up our delimiters. Let's get our replacement. We might need to do preg replace callback. I don't know. We're going to work on snippet, of course. Whoops, wrong suggestion. Snippet, there we go. And we'll reassign this back. Oops, not block, sorry. We'll reassign this back into snippet. I'm already messing up the names. Okay, so what I want to do is let's dump occurrence, and let's dump snippet here. And we'll run the test suite to actually get the conversion so we can see like in a real world scenario. But just for our debugging, because again, I'm not going to headshot this, right? This is going to take some iterations to get all the way right. But what we're probably going to look for here for now, I'm just going to hard code. We definitely going to want to escape this bit. I'm going to hard code browser here, but this replacement of the variable name is actually, it'll be kind of like a string grouping here, right? An alternation between the different potential variable names. But for now, we're going to call it browser. Now, from a syntax perspective, it's possible that we can have spaces here. Again, I don't want this to be super strict. I need it to be somewhat lenient because it is string replacement. You could technically, as we talked about before, you could break this down a line. You could, have some weird space here. You could break that down a line. There's just all sorts of line break and spacing that you technically could have between this arrow. So I want to just allow for that, right? All right. Oh, I'm hearing some chat. Let's see what's going on in the chat. Hey, Jeffrey, what's up? Hey, Samuel. Hey, Ashley. Oh, Ashley, hey, thanks for joining, man. Stream keeps breaking. Is it chopping? What are you on? You're on YouTube? You should be good. I don't know. No one's complained of the, no one's complained of kind of like the streaming before. I don't think that I'm locally slow, but I could be. Let me know if it keeps happening, or if someone else has some of that too, if there's some lag. Anyway, we'll keep rocking here. Next would be, next would be this potential space on the other side, right? Again, we just want some space on the other side, and then it's visit, and then you'd have to be some kind of opening bracket, right? Now again, you could have a space between visit and the opening bracket and all this stuff. Opening curly, but I'm gonna leave that alone for now. So I'm also gonna just throw an I in here. This just gives me case insensitivity, right? Okay, so basically this right now kind of would match variations of this, right? That's kind of what we're after. It would match kind of variations of that. Variations meaning case sensitivity, and then also some potential white space in places where it's allowed by PHP. So for example, on this side or on this side, right? We're not gonna worry so much about visit space opening parenthesis. In the 10 years of Shift, I don't have too many people talking, reporting that has been a problem, so. Okay, so the replacement is effectively going to be our first bit. We're going to throw a space in here, equals, and then we'll throw visit back. Now again, we're kind of rewriting what they've done, so technically if they did a capital V here or something, we would theoretically rewrite that for them. But again, this is the proper code. I'm comfortable, doing that. From here on, any kind of spacing would be allowed, right? So let's see where this gets us. I don't think we need these anymore because we kind of know what's going to happen. Here's one key factor though. Here's one key point. We're going to keep the same variable name. And I'm going to bring up one of my own test cases on why this is going to matter a little bit later on. But we're going to, even though Pest in their examples use page instead of browser, we're going to keep the naming. that they have originally. And again, this goes back to kind of like that potential for refactor or adopting conventions. I want your test suite to run. I don't want to be so opinionated that your test suite doesn't run and I give you something that can't work and needs, needs a lot of manual steps that are just tedious and kind of honestly pointless. So by keeping the variable name, I can make sure that if you're using that variable in other ways in the rest of this block, it's going to keep working. And again, we'll see an actual code sample of this here in a minute when I run this PR. So let's make sure the tests are passing locally first. So let's do vendor bin. Let's bring up this convert API test. I'm going to copy this out. Let's run this whole thing real quick. Okay, so it's saying everything's passing. That seems unlikely. Oh, it does nothing. Okay. Wait a second. Oh, not pint. Sorry. I was like, why are we passing? That's pint. Let's go back to PHP unit. There we go. Okay, that's more like it. Okay, let's take a look here. So let's start at the top with our debugs. So we have our lines, we have our offsets, we have body. Here's our browsers, and browser is browser. So here's what we can basically take browser and just, implode it with pipes to give us the different potential variable names. So let's go do that real quick. So basically we can say the variables here are, I'm going to break this up a couple lines again so we can see everything a bit better. All right, and then let's do this with implode. And what's that under? Occurrence browsers. Let's get occurrence. Oh my goodness, browsers. And what's implode? Glue? Yeah, glue's first. Separator is first. So the separator for regex is pipe. Okay, so we don't need to dump occurrence anymore. And then what does snippet do? Snippet's this. So we forgot to bring our $sign back. Okay, so that's fine. So let's get rid of this. We see what's going on now. Let's format this and let's throw in, we're actually going to need to escape that $sign to put it out. I don't know if that's enough, to be honest. I might need to double that up. Let's find out. Let's run this again. Hey, look at that. Sweet. Okay, so it worked. Let's dump out snippet again so we can see it. Dump. It worked. I see what the other problem is. So here you go. It made visit. We got browser equals visit. Awesome. Let's go back here. So here's the basic test. Here's the test case we're coming from, right? Here's this. Here's browser visit. So we can see that browser is in here as arrow visit, and we've now turned it into browser equals visit, right? If we go and look at the after, here we go. So we're passing. What the test is actually failing on is there's a double semicolon here. And the reason for that is, again, from a syntax tree perspective, the semicolon's not included in the statement. And we're taking the body up to that point. So again, it's just kind of like one of those off by one string errors. So I'm not going to worry too much about that right now. We could throw this in here and run this test and we should pass, which we do. So again, that gets cleaned up in the formatting. So I'm not going to spend too much time cleaning that up. That's just a rule in PHP CS Fixer that I can just strip that out real fast. So I think this is pretty good. We'll see this in a multiple browser test, which I think I have as part of the Laravel Shift Dusk test suite. So let's go ahead and whip this. I'll push it up. We'll deploy from the laptop, and I'll rerun it. That way I'm not, leaking stuff as I tend to do on my streams. So let's rerun this. We should fail again because of the double semicolon. All good. Let's run vendor bin pint. Make sure all of our changes look nice. Probably just should have done dash dash dirty there. Let's fix that. Dash dash dirty. All right, sweet. And then let's do get add dot, get whip, get push. All right, let me jump on the laptop real fast. Hey, Mateus, how's it going? We are cooking here. All right, so I'm gonna pull down on the laptop. Once I connect to the interwebs. All right, cool, and we'll do an sh deploy. Again, the shift workers, the shift code base is not a Laravel application. It's also predates a lot of things, even like Forge. So I don't use any of those or Cloud at the moment to kind of manage deployment. I just have an old school sh script that just runs a bunch of shell commands and rsyncs everything up to the various shift workers. Which really, again, as I've mentioned before, underneath Forge and Cloud, that's all those things are doing. They're just SSHing into boxes and running scripts. So it's all the same concept. Again, I'm not in a Cloud dashboard just because I've just got this old school deployment approach. So, and it's not a Laravel application. So, okay, let's see here. Let me get out to the box here. Let me get on one of my internal workers. And I think that's where we ran this last time. So let's, cool. All right, it's running. Let's make sure nothing explodes. Okay, shift ran in 7.4 seconds. If I go back out to pull requests, there's our latest one. Excellent. So we saw all this last week. There's really nothing here other than convert test cases. Again, we remember that all of these are kind of pipeline things. They're not individual commits as some shifts that we might have seen before do. So for example, add dependencies was kind of a 1-to-1 ratio between a change and a commit. But sometimes some of these tasks kind of group together to form a larger task. And in this case, convert test cases is exactly that. So let's go take a look at how we did. Did we unwrap these things? Did we convert the browser variables? How does it look, right? Okay, so this checkout test, we've removed the namespace, we've kept all the imports, we killed all of the PHP unit class structure. If we had a better diff here, we would see though that each one of these got converted. So, okay. So we still have this browse. Oh. This does need to make a commit. This does need to make a commit. We're not seeing our changes because I have dirty changes. I have dirty changes remaining on the server. Dirty. All right, let's go fix that. Let's jump back over here. If we look, we made a commit. We made a commit here. Yeah, someone else, hey Tyga, someone else mentioned YouTube was having some buffering issues. I don't know. I recently added Twitch to the stream. I don't know if that somehow deprioritized YouTube or what, but it sounded like some of the other mediums like Twitter and stuff are okay, or you can just watch me later. Sorry about that. I don't really know. Okay, we need to make a commit for Convert API. So let's just drop in a commit right here for now. So we got this commit, and we'll say return commit with message. I'm just going to call this whip convert to Pest API, just so we know what it is. I'm calling it whip for my own, I don't want to actually call this convert to Pest API because it's not complete. So for me, actually, truly, it's still a whip. So, all right, same dance. Get add dot, get whip, get push. Let's pull down over here and let's rerun this. So, got to get pull. Yeah, I'll look into the YouTube thing later. Like I said, I just added Twitch, so maybe somehow that took away some juice from, yeah, Twitch works flawlessly, yeah. I don't know, maybe somehow because of the Twitch added stream, it's, who knows. All right. Let's pull, maybe YouTube's actually having issues. You never know. All right, redeploy, rerun. Did we close? We got to close the branch, otherwise it explodes. Okay, cool. All right, as soon as that finishes deploying to the workers, we'll rerun it. I think we're pretty close here. I mean, if this works, there's really not much else to do, to be honest. There's really not much else to do. Anything else would just be a simple string manipulation between a Dusk-esque assertion and its Pest counterpart, which again would just be yet another string replacement at this point, because we're isolated in on that block of code now. So, you know, we could trust, again, from a good enough perspective, like we're isolated in on this block only. If there's an assert path is here and Pest calls it assert path, again, pretty high likelihood that changing that syntax, you know, with our similar type of regex is going to do the right thing. So the point is, I'm not too worried about finding every single one of those before launch, because again, I will review it for my own code because I want to actually use this. That's the best ever when you dog food, right? You're going to find all the stuff because you have your own use. So anyway, let's rerun this. It's all pushed up to the worker. Shift internal worker running now. Ran in 6.2 seconds. All right. There we go. There's our new one. And here's our whip convert. So we'll go back real quick. I'll isolate the atomic commit for this just so we can focus. But we can see that the initial pass of copying over test is actually pulling out the class-based syntax of PHP unit and turning it into, you know, the theoretically a runnable Pest test. Right now, you could actually run this code. You would still be using Dusk, but you could run this code. You would just be running Pest instead of PHP unit, or you'd be writing Pest instead of PHP unit. So you'd still run PHP unit, technically. Okay, let's go back to the commits, and let's focus in on this one. So what we should really see here, actually, whoop, not Google Lens, hello, cancel. What we should really see here is if I throw in $W1, it should maybe give us a slightly better diff. Yeah, there we go. So look, all we're really doing here is unwrapping. And then we got our double little bit. But all we really did was unwrap this browse. Now, where's our visit? I would have expected to also see a visit being replaced here. So let's take a look at what happened there. Something's off with the visit. So we've got this browse, we unwrapped it, but we're actually not, look at that. There's our answer. See, this is why you run it on real world code. We need some more test cases in here. Here's some interesting things. We're logging in as, we're visiting route, not visit. Did it get any of these? Do any of them start with this browse? Or this visit, I should say. None of my tests do, it looks like. Oh, here we go. Okay, so it does work. For the simple case of browser visit, it does work. But there are other ways in which you would chain your Dusk tests, as we see here. There's visit route. There's the initial logging in as, which we would need to rewrite to be acting as. So yeah, oh, here you go, look, here's a nice one. Here's one where it actually was on 2 lines. So see, our regex tolerated that, that's nice. So now we just got browser visit, perfect. Okay, so for the limited case where, yeah, but we're gonna need to handle these login as and all that kind of stuff. The login as one's actually gonna be a little bit tricky because I don't think Pest does it that way. I think they call this acting as. This would typically be before a visit call, though. That actually might require some abstract syntax tree analysis, actually, because I'd have to get this full bit, pull it out, and then assume that the next thing beyond it is visit, and that might not be true. So this is going to take a second. I think that might be kind of an off-stream challenge for me. But we see here that this isn't doing as much as we kind of I naively thought. It is working. The code we wrote works, so that's nice. But there's going to be more to do here, more than I thought. So it's, again, always good to run against real-world stuff. Our test suite's passing, but this isn't as close as I might have thought. This is a really good test case right here. Boom. I should put this in my fixtures and get that working. So that's what I'm gonna do off stream. I'm gonna get that working. Before I stop today, there's one more thing I want to do. We got a few minutes. I like to make these about 40-ish minutes. So let's do that. So first things first, let's jump over here and let me leave myself a note. To do. I need to rewrite login as calls, right? I'll need to rewrite those first before the visit. And then replace visit also probably needs to handle visit route, right? I could handle that here. It is a variant of the visit calls. And that would be pretty straightforward, right? I mean, even if Pest doesn't have a visit route, it would really just be visit and then route, because route's a helper at the end of the day that's going to be available. So we basically would say, you know, from visit route to visit route. So all good there. That should be a relatively easy change. So I'll write the test cases for that, fill in the blanks here. But before we quit, there is something else that I remembered. Nuno actually had a pretty good tweet about this, I think Friday, and I was like, oh, I need to add that to Shift. So I'm going to throw it in miscellaneous for now. But in your Dusk tests, and we can see an example of this actually, if I kind of undo the white space bit here. I think we can see an example of this. It's definitely on the filter, shift filter. Yeah, here we go. This category block. This category block is kind of a shorthand for basically finding a data attribute that has category block. Let's just go to the real world page real quick. LaravelShift.com, not GitHub. Come on. You can see how much I work on the project versus go to actually the site. Let me run a shift. Or I'm not going to run a shift, but here we go. Just so we can see this. So I have a bunch of tests to make sure that these filters work the right way. And if we get into here we go. Here's the Dusk. See this Dusk attribute for category filter? I can name this attribute so Dusk can find it. Otherwise, I don't have an ID on here. I don't really have class names that are distinguishable. So I can give it this HTML attribute for Dusk, and then that allows me to find it this way. And then underneath it just wraps that in its own Dusk thing. It would be nice, since I'm not using Dusk anymore, to convert them, right? So that's kind of this miscellaneous task I wanna work on, right? This may end up being its own task, but that's kind of the next thing I think there is to do. So we basically would find anywhere we have a, Dusk equals, something, right? Bit. And then we'll change to, I think it's data. It's a data attribute now of data test, I think is the default for playwright. Now I think you can change this. You can technically also change this. Again, 80-20 rule, good enough. Let's just start with what comes out of the box. So what comes out of the box is that. Now, of course, you can make it data-dusk. You might even already have it be data test, in which case there's no change necessary. But this is kind of the, conventional, easy peasy use case, common use case would be this. So there's nothing else in miscellaneous right now, so I'm just going to use this because it's kind of like this extra task that I didn't really think of yet, but it needs to happen. So for those to work, for this test to kind of keep working, we have to convert that. Now, I think the syntax of the @ is the same in Pest. So there's no change to the actual assertion. It's just we need to make sure that the HTML attributes behave kind of the same way. Now, parsing Blade and parsing HTML is challenging, is the word I'll use. It's not impossible, but the point is that neither of them have a direct parser. So there's no way for me to parse the abstract syntax tree and get that high fidelity to know that this is truly a data attribute. There's also a lot of different ways, especially in Blade, where we can manipulate or change, attributes. Like, for example, if you're using like a Blade component, you can pass in like an attribute as an array. So we're not really getting like the raw HTML that's output. We're getting, you'd have to find that in a PHP array. It's just not going to happen. What I'll probably do kind of at the end of this, and I do this with shifts a lot, is, I might just do something where I search for like the string Dusk, right? And just say, hey, I found a couple instances of Dusk. You might have been using this as a data attribute. It's not a very common word, especially if it were quoted in some way. I think that comment might have value. It wouldn't be super, super generic per se. So, again, best we can. So best we can is, let's go back to Convert API. As with a lot of these tasks, it's going to kind of take this same structure, right? Now, it won't just be PHP files in this case. It'll actually be any file, because you could have a raw HTML file. You could have, co-located JavaScript and HTML in files, right? There's a lot of different things. So what we're really just kind of going to look for here, and again, this is kind of a high level, search, and we'll actually go so far as to say matching. So this is the difference between a literal string and then a regex. What we'll do is we'll search for Dusk, and then you can optionally have some spacing, because again, you might break down. Lines. This could or could not be quoted. There's a lot of things here, and in fact, we'll probably go so far as to even say that there's a word boundary on the inside of Dusk. So let's do something like this. So you would have to have Dusk equals in your project, in the file somewhere, right? And we can take off this shared paths thing, because it's not restricted. It's not restricted just to the test files. It's just project wide. So project wide, if we see Dusk, and it can have a space, if we see Dusk equals somewhere, then we're going to want to probably take a better look at that file, right? So we'll say did not find Dusk attributes, right? We'll return. Otherwise, let's for each over these and then try to do kind of a more high fidelity potential replacement, right? Now, again, we're not going to parse it, unfortunately, because we don't have a parser, but we will do roughly the same pattern as we always do, which is loop over the files that it found, get the file contents. Again, we're not going to parse it. We're just flat out going to kind of work on contents here. So again, the most naive approach would just be to write hopefully what's a pretty decent regex, a pretty specific but lenient regex, right? So we'll say contents equals preg replace, same thing, pattern will ultimately be delimited, and then we have to have some kind of word boundary, dusk, same thing, possible spacing between it. We're gonna go so far as to say it has to be quoted. So it has to be one of these, right? And then we could actually backtick that so like it's not super crazy. So we could say something like, then you have to be the same, right? So you have to be opening and closing of the same. And then in here is it's potentially it's not a selector, it's an identifier. And we could probably safely make the assumption of what's in that identifier, right? So we could go so far as to say like, this has to be a word character or probably a dash. So basically alphanumeric underscore or dash. I don't think you probably could put dots and stuff in here, but again, I wouldn't imagine that's very common. So I'm gonna go with that. And then just to be safe, we'll probably end up making that, we'll make it kind of like non-greedy. That's probably not necessary. In fact, I'm gonna drop it out. It's not necessary. Based on our back reference here and the fact that we're only ever matching this, that's not necessary. Regex can already be like a super noisy thing anyway, so I really try to move any unnecessary syntax because it's already so like syntax rich, right? So we'll replace this again with data test. You know what? Let's give them a little fidelity here too. If you've got some spacing that you've done here, we're gonna honor that. So we'll say $1, keep your spacing, $2 to keep your right quote, and then $3 for your actual identifier, and then $2 again to re-quote it back. So all we're really doing here is replacing Dusk in that event with data test, and then we're going to keep whatever potential spacing you had for the equal sign. We're going to keep your specific quotation. We're going to keep your specific identifier, and then again, we're going to go back to using that quote to theoretically close it. And we're going to do that in contents. So there you have it. So, pretty lightweight here. Very naive, and this could potentially have, some issues. So I'm not going to say that this is done by any means, but I think the whole point of the stream is not so much to have this thing be all the way finished. It's not just about converting Dusk. It's also a little bit of insight into how I build the shifts, because I think some people are interested in that. And this is a lot, as we've seen here, just the few that we've written. This is a lot of what the shifts are. They're basically a first pass to gather what we potentially believe could be things we want to scan, then a more high fidelity pass, ideally parsing it into an abstract syntax tree so we know with 100% certainty, hey, that is a method call. That's a method call to visit, and the left side of this has a variable name that matches this other thing. And again, we can intuit about the code by looking at the syntax tree and saying, okay, that's 100% the call we care about. In the absence of a parser, as we've done here, it's the same structure of a task. We limit what we want, we loop over it, and then we perform some code changes potentially. So in this case, we just try to be as loose as possible. Now that there are some things I could do here that I could probably increase the fidelity. For example, in the path, I could check the extension. Is it a .js file? Is it a .ts file? Is it a .vue file or blade.php? If I knew those things, then there might be some adjustments I'd want to make, right? Some leniency to know that, okay, well, maybe in this case it doesn't have to be quoted because it's TypeScript or something, or vice versa, right? Or it's Vue. So again, I will leave that up to users to tell me, oh, hey, I had some data attributes and it didn't catch this specific way I wrote it. Okay, send me the way you wrote it. I put it in my test fixtures. I tweak this code right here to make it accept that, but not break the other stuff. And I just keep doing that 1,000 times until this is, 81% good instead of 80%. So anyway, let's run vendor. Vendor bin, not vin. Sound like my daughter. All right. Oh, not against everything. Sorry. Dash dirty. Let's finish up. Get add dot. Get whip. I'll probably rename that from miscellaneous to data attributes. I think that's a nice atomic commit. Again, because of the fidelity, I would want to make it atomic commit, because if it's somehow found this Dusk attribute that you actually want to keep, you can just quickly revert that commit. And again, there'll probably also be a comment here where I search, maybe there's something else here where I do, search for, I actually want to literally search for something like Dusk. If I can type, there we go. So maybe search for something where it's like a quoted string of Dusk. And where my mind goes here is like, if you're passing in attributes to a blade component or a livewire component or any kind of component that's being generated, I think if we saw Dusk as a string literal, right, it might be something you want to act upon. So I think I could search for those, and if I found them, just leave them a generic note of like, hey, we found something that might have looked like an HTML data attribute that you used for your Dusk tests. Check it out, line number 35. Super easy, it's helpful. And again, it might increase the fidelity, and then potentially the user could report what that code snippet looked like, and maybe eventually I support it. So, or I automate it. Okay, I think we're in a pretty good place here. I'm gonna work on these to-dos that I've listed here. I think what we'll do tomorrow, again, I feel like this is in a place where like the alpha could run. So like, I think what we'll do tomorrow is maybe what might be fun to see. You can let me know in the chat, but what might be fun to see is to go ahead and add this out here on the website, launch it at kind of that low beta pricing, and let people start messing with it. Start getting that feedback, right? I'll get it to where mine runs. The other thing too is like, technically Pest v4 is not out yet. I mean, you could point to dev master or dev main or whatever, but like, it's not really out yet. So, get this out here so it's on the website. Maybe I can get some people to come in and run it and try it on their own stuff, and go from there over the next few days. But I think adding it to the site is kind of another component of this, right? We've been pretty deep in like how I build Shift, but like how I run Shift is also part of the puzzle. So if you're interested in that, let me know. If not, we'll keep hacking on the conversions. But like I said, I'll do one more stream, and then I think Nuno's launching everything Thursday. So again, I just want to kind of get it on the website ready to go where I can just toggle the switch and it's out there. So, and then actually run this PR for real for myself and see if I can get it all going, right? So anyway, thanks everyone for joining live. I will see you tomorrow.